as of this week. So, I apologize, but here we are. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we are going to review the calendar. I did not give you guys a calendar last week. That was my mistake. I just didn't get it done. So this week's calendar has this week and last week on it as well. So we're going to review that. And then even though you may have talked about this all day today, we are going to talk very quickly through the PICA goal setting. We're not really going to focus too much on it. We're just going to talk about it and talk about how it applies to you guys as students. We are going to really focus in on vocabulary strategies today. So we're going to look at what you do when you come across a word that you don't know. So we're going to look at the strategies that you use and how we actually overcome that. And then we're going to get the vocabulary words. So you get 2 vocabulary words for today. So you will get 2 today, 2 tomorrow, 1 on Wednesday, and we'll review all 5 of them. Thursday will be the test. And speaking of tests, we are going to have a test over the active reading strategy. So we will review those, talk about those, and then we're actually going to practice when we review Mesopotamia. So we're going to talk a little bit about Mesopotamia today, and we're going to review it by using those active reading strategies. So the first thing I have for you guys is the calendar for this week and last week. So it is double-sided. So we will look at the side that has 4 days instead of the side that has 3 days for last week. I like to give you guys calendars because it helps me stay focused. It helps you realize what we're working on. So I like to give you guys these every week. I'm going to try to just continue to do them 2 weeks at a time and see how that works out. So if you look at the back side of this, we have September 14th through the 17th. So today, what we're going to focus on, we just talked about, so the PICA traits, vocabulary strategies, vocabulary and active reading review, and Mesopotamia. So over on the other side, you see objectives. Those objectives are the things that I'm hoping to help you understand before you leave here each day. So today, I'm hoping that you guys know how to set goals and establish steps to accomplish those goals. That's what we're going to talk about today. I hope you guys will be able to use vocabulary skills to determine meanings of words. We are going to focus today on context clues, what they are, how to identify them, and how to use them. So we're going to practice with that or talk about that today, and then we're going to be practicing with it for the rest of the week. We're going to define some terms. So you're going to have 2 vocabulary words today. We'll define both of those. Use active reading strategies. So I'm going to be giving you guys pieces like this one that you're getting today on Mesopotamia throughout this week to practice those active reading strategies with. On Thursday, you will see that you have a test over the active reading strategies. So I suggest a couple of things. First of all, practice. Practice when I say practice. Practice in many different ways. Second of all, write down information on the strategies as we go through them and talk about them. Okay? And third, ask questions if you have any. So tomorrow what we'll discuss is we're going to go over vocabulary, and then tomorrow we're really going to focus on test-taking skills. So we're going to look at test-taking skills and strategies. We're going to look at true-false test-taking skills. We're going to look at multiple choice, matching, constructed responses. We're going to look at all of those types, and then we're going to be practicing with those. We are going to discuss power and morality. So a lot of times there's power that is handed over to people with very, very bad morals. Sometimes people with really great morals have no power to do anything with that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow, and then we're going to talk about everybody's favorite person, a guy named Hammurabi. So for those of you who've been in my classes in the past, we're going to talk about Hammurabi. We're going to use examples of his leadership style, and we're going to focus in on Hammurabi tomorrow. We will be working a little bit more with Hammurabi on Wednesday as well. And on Wednesday, you guys are going to get your novel assignments. So everybody in here will read a novel throughout the entire course. For those of you who've been in my classes in the past, they gave me a bunch of money, so I bought a bunch of books. So we have a bunch of different books, and I'm going to try to use books that I think will work well for you. We are going to talk more about those books tomorrow, and then you guys will get those assignments on Wednesday. You will not be reading alone. So you will be reading with at least one other person. I'm going to try to give a pretty big variety in the class, and you guys are going to get, with that, you're going to get a packet of information, and that packet of information is to help you guys understand a little bit more about your book and understand a bit more about what the authors do to create a powerful text. Thursday, you will have your vocabulary quiz. The vocabulary quiz, for those of you who haven't had my classes before, the vocabulary quiz is not, I'm not going to say it's simple, but it's not that difficult. There's a matching section at the top. You match up the meaning of the word with the definition of the word. The second half of it is just using those terms in some way, shape, or form. So you may be asked to, an open-ended question. You may be asked to fill in the blank. You may be asked to come up with an idea on your own. They're not that difficult as long as you know the meaning. And tomorrow we're going to talk about some strategies that you guys can use to help you figure out the meaning of the word even better. You will get your active reading test. So after you finish the vocabulary quiz, you're going to bring that up, and I'm going to give you the active reading test. It's a big test. It's worth 40 points. Your midterm is worth 50. Your final is worth 100. So that, you can see, that's pretty heavily weighted. It's like 4 vocabulary quizzes, 4 weeks of vocabulary. So it's heavily weighted, but we're going to go over the strategies every day this week, and we're going to be practicing with the strategies all week as well. And then finally on Thursday, you're going to get your first big assignment. It's the personal narrative. We're going to get through it. We're going to do the pieces together. You're going to get through it. We're going to make sure you guys all get through it. Okay? We'll do it together. We'll do the pieces together. We're going to brainstorm together. We're going to outline together. We're going to do this together. Okay? Questions of the calendar. All right? Put those away whenever and wherever you guys want to. Except the trash. So we are going to talk very briefly about the PICA goal setting. So for those of you who are new, these PICA traits that we talk about are professional skills and strategies that you can use. So we have been in professional environments. Many of you have probably been in professional environments before. And by professional, we mean work environments. So in these professional environments, there are things that you can do to really screw up, and there are some things that you can do to make yourself better. So last term, we talked a little bit about adaptability. So Lexi is featured up there as my adaptable student because I shuffled her around a bunch. So adaptability is being able to adapt to situations that you're put in, that you don't necessarily choose to be put in. So that is a really great quality to have. It's not easy to have, but it's something that we want to aspire to have. The second one that we had was attendance. So attendance, of course you want to be there, you want to be present, but not only do you want to be there and be present, but you want to be active. The other one over here. So the third one for last term is emotional intelligence. I never got my pictures, so they're not up there. My superstars aren't up there. Emotional intelligence is being able to gauge someone else's emotions and tweak and adjust your emotions based on that to avoid confrontation and to avoid not being productive. So if somebody is in a really bad mood, you back off a little bit and you're not in their face. If somebody's in a really good mood, you lift up your mood a little bit to match up with them. So emotional intelligence is gauging others, their emotions, and then being able to adapt based on that. So what we're going to talk about today is goal setting. So when we talk about goal setting, we start with this information about Michael Jordan. So you guys remember when we did the famous failures, and we talked a little bit about Michael Jordan, and we talked specifically about how he didn't make his high school basketball team. So he didn't make the varsity team, so he was very frustrated. So he went home, he cried, and then he decided he was going to pull up his bootstraps and he was going to make himself successful. So he did this step by step. He didn't just wake up one day and he was a giant and able to touch the rim and fly through the air. He didn't wake up like that. So he had to build his skills in order to do that. So he set some short-term goals for himself. In doing this, he would match up with one goal, and then that would lead him into the next goal. So an example of this, he was building his endurance. So he ran a lot. He ran and ran and ran and ran. Build up his lungs, it built up his legs, it built up his muscles all together. That was great, but then the next step of that was actually doing some zigzags. So running a straight line is one thing, but when your body has to turn and move and navigate, that's something completely different. So he let one short-term goal, he would accomplish that, and he would let that lead him into the next goal. As he did this, he made sure that he learned something through every step of the way. There was one point where he said he learned that he didn't like feeling like a failure. That's still a lesson that can be learned. So when we're creating these goals, we're creating short-term goals, and we're letting one lead to the next. So an example of this, if I said, hey, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, well, that's a goal. Not super realistic for me right now, and I would have to create some short-term goals in order to reach that long-term goal. So we let the short-term goals lead to the next one. So his goal became he wanted to be a starter on the varsity team. So he stayed focused, and he set goal after goal after goal, and he kept approaching everything with the end in mind. So it's kind of that light at the end of the tunnel, but you can't always get through a really long tunnel without other lights along the way. There are torches along the way. Okay? So we've got to let those lead us. So Michael Jordan is an example of somebody who has met his goal. Who did you guys write about? Who did you guys write about for you to do now? Ourselves? Right. Oh, you guys all had to write. Other assignment. That was way better. No, it wasn't way better. You guys are amazing. Okay, so what are some goals that you guys have?
You want to live a comfortable life?
Okay, so what do you mean by a comfortable life?
I'll build a name. I have what I want.
Good. So
Kids taken care of.
that is what we want to call specific. So when you specify your goals, so what you think is a comfortable life, it may be different from like my brother. My brother, as long as he's breathing, he's cool. He's like, yeah, I'm digging it.
What about
So-
your girlfriend?
Oh, that girl. So he is comfortable, and his comfort is different from your comfort. So you want to make sure that your goals, whatever they are, they're very specific. So by saying and itemizing those things, by saying you want to, you said have a decent job, be able to provide for your family, be able to take care of your son. So those are specific things that you can do. Anybody else?
I want to be a pharmacist.
Okay, so we'll get right back to that. You want to be a pharmacist. So what are some things that you need to do in order to make that goal?
Go to college.
Okay, so you got to go to college. What comes before that?
High school, finish.
Graduating.
Okay, so graduating from the Excel Center. And if we were to be even more specific, or we were to itemize that even more to make it achievable, so make those smaller steps, the first step may be passing the classes this term, the next term passing those classes, and then passing the classes after that. Maybe it's applying for scholarships during your final term. Maybe after that, then it's, before that, it's applying to schools. Applying to schools and applying for scholarships. So you have several different goals that are along the way to get you to that end goal. Good. Renee, what'd you say?
Working hard to get you ready for school. Like you were saying, the school is.
Okay, so when we're creating these goals, we want to be very specific. So if your goal is to graduate from the Excel Center, great. So in order to make this measurable, you have to figure out what steps you're going to meet along the way. So I had a student who was in my English 2 class last term and this term, and his goal is to pass English 2 with a B. That's very specific. That's something that we can measure. So whether he gets his grade or not, that's going to be something that we can measure. It's achievable. So achievable is something that you can actually obtain. So if I said my goal was to win $1 million, that's not achievable. I don't play the lottery, so that's not achievable for me. That's not something that I can actually get. So if I said I wanted to earn $1 million within the next 10 years, not likely, it's my spending habit, but it's definitely something that is more attainable than I want to win $1 million. So when we're talking about this, we want something that we can achieve, something that is relevant. So winning $1 million to me, that's going to pay my bills, and then I would be the type of person that would still be back at work on Monday. So that's not really something that I need. Now, sending my kids to college for free, that would be something that would be relevant to me, because that's something that matters to me. Time bound. You want to set specific dates for any of your goals, whether they're the short-term goals or the long-term goals. Why is it so important to set dates?
Then you actually work towards that goal.
Good. When it's open reign, it's kind of like you're grasping at straws. There's not a whole lot that you can grab a hold of. So instead, if you have a time limit set for that, then you can focus in on one goal at a time or shorter goals at that one period of time. Good. So I like to frame these discussions around the SMART goals. For those of you in my writing class, this is going to help you later on, so pay attention to it. But these SMART goals are actually how I got my raises. So when I worked at Ivy Tech, we had to establish SMART goals. And at the end of the year, you were gauged on your SMART goals. And did you obtain your SMART goals? So if I said that I wanted to enroll 500 students, well, in turn, I'm really putting myself in a bad spot. Because that's not realistic. Now, if I said that I wanted to reach out to 100 students, that's something a bit more attainable. That's something that I can actually achieve. That's something that mattered to my position. If I said within 2 semesters, that would have a time limit on it. It would be measured by the amount of students that I had in my classes, as well as my Phi Theta Kappa students. So it would be something that I could actually measure as well. Measurability is usually one of the most difficult pieces, one of the difficult components of that. So later on, when you guys get into some careers, certain careers use this scale. A lot of careers use this scale, the SMART scale. So SMART goal setting. It's also how a lot of people get their education paid for. So Miss Shalene and I, our best friend Deanna, she has never paid a cent for her education. So she has a master's degree. She's now working on a doctoral degree. And she has never paid a cent for it, because she is able to use these SMART goals to get other people to pay things for her. She's smart, yeah? So this is a really great way to really specifically itemize what your goals are. So as we talk about goals, we will start to look at and talk specifically about our objectives, so our 2 vocabulary words. So the first of those vocabulary words is the word objectives. So what are objectives?
Goals.
Goals. Pretty simple. Objectives are goals. I'll go back to this in just a minute. So objectives are simply goals. Now, occasionally when you guys come across vocabulary words or words that you don't necessarily know, there is often a synonym somewhere within that sentence, the sentence above it, or the sentence behind it. And that's what we call using context clues, which we're going to look at more specifically here in just a minute. So if I said, what are your objectives or goals, that's a synonym. So that's a word that means the same, or something very similar. It's nice to have synonyms because they take the place of the word and it's pretty easy. But occasionally, there's not one single word that is going to take that place. So we have to use definitions and sometimes examples. So what are consequences? What are consequences? Good. The result of your action or the results of an action. So when you think of consequences, I don't want you to think of things that are necessarily negative. Oftentimes we think of consequences in a negative way. But consequences are just the result. So if I open the door, it gets cooler in here. That's the consequence of opening the door.
Well, keep it open. I felt the consequences.
I'm so loud though. So to enhance our understanding of this word, we can also use an example. So an example of someone dealing with consequences. For me, my brother is going to jail next week.
Are you being serious or you just playing?
No, he's going to jail.
What's he going to jail for?
Because he's an idiot. I'm going to get to that in a second. His stupidity. Okay. So as a result, a consequence of his stupidity, he is going to jail next week.
Oh, dang.
Yep. I'll be there for a while. So
You been there for a long
I
time?
have, probably not a long time, but never long enough. So my example is something that relates to me. Oftentimes when you're establishing what you know about vocabulary words, you want to come up with an example that's something that you can connect directly to. So if you know someone who faces negative consequences because of their actions, then you could give yourself an example for that. You may encounter in context clues examples. So we're actually going to talk just briefly. I think everybody has this written down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what those context clues actually are framed like. When you come across a word that you don't know, what do?
Underline.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Or circle.
Do you stop? You come across a word that you don't know, do you stop?
Sometimes.
Okay. So a lot of you probably go to your phone or your dictionary right away when you look up or when you have a word that you don't know. What's the problem with doing that? Okay. It may not line up. What else? Okay, you may not have the resource. So you're reading something and you're starting to understand it, and then you come across this word, and you just stop, and then you go to your dictionary or your phone.
I guess it kind of throws you off, you know, you remember what you're reading.
Good. You're going to automatically lose some comprehension when you take yourself out of that piece. So we can compare this active reading, the idea of active reading, we can compare it to something like exercising. I don't do a lot of it, but I hear that when you stop, it's even harder to start again. So it's the same idea. Don't stop reading when you come across a word that you don't know. The worst thing that you can do for yourself is to stop and then go somewhere else to get the information. You're going to lose comprehension by doing that. Is it important to know how to pronounce a word?
Yes.
No.
It doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of life, you're probably not going to need to pronounce the word correctly. It's wonderful if you can, but it's not the end of the world if you cannot. I'm going to show you guys how I get around this here in just a little bit. So when you're using context clues, you're using the rest of the sentence. Sometimes it's the sentence before it, sometimes it's the sentence after it. And they will contain words that help you judge the meaning of the word. So sometimes there are synonyms. Remember, synonyms are words that mean the same thing. Antonyms mean what? Good, opposite. We also have definitions. So remember that when you guys were reading last week and you had the words that were bolded and in parentheses, you had the definition. If you had stopped, you would have lost some of your comprehension of what was being said. But instead, you went on and you found the definition. We also have my favorite, which is examples. So sometimes you have a concept or an idea, and later on in the next sentence or in a couple of sentences later, there's an example that helps you understand the meaning a bit better. So context clues are the first step in figuring out the meaning of a word that you come across that you may or may not know. You guys are going to have some examples today of words that you may or may not know. The more words that you know, the easier it is for you to figure out words and the meanings of words. When we look at the piece today, most of you will probably be able to catch on to at least one of those words fairly quickly and easily. There are a couple of words that are a bit more difficult. Some have context clues. Some, my students in second period, they were using prefix, root, and suffix strategies, which we're going to talk about later this week. And it's essentially dissecting the word to figure out the meaning of it. And you're going to see that today. All right, any questions over context clues?
Move that up a minute.
Yep. So your vocabulary words are objectives, which mean what?
Goals.
Goals. And consequences. What does that mean? It's the result of an action. So just to give you an idea of what information or what kind of questions you may have on the test, you're going to have some matching. So the first ones will be matching. So it'll have, on one side it'll have objectives, and the other side somewhere it'll have goals. You just have to mix those two up. At the bottom, you're going to have open-ended questions. So I may ask you, what is a consequence for an action? So I may ask you, what is something that you've done? And what was the result of that action? But I'm going to say, what was the consequence of an action that you had, or that you did, something that you did. I may ask you what a course objective is. A specific course objective.
Pass the final.
What's that?
Pass the final.
I don't usually have that written. But we talked a little bit ago about vocabulary. So one of your objectives is to define terms. That's a pretty easy objective. It's very, very narrow in scope. Okay, any questions over these context clues? We are going to review the active reading strategies, and we're going to use them. So you guys may want to have that piece with the chevrons. You may want to have that out. Bold downward arrows. The chevrons. You good?
Yeah, could you go back to that small thing?
Give me just a second so I can see. Okay.
Yeah, is there any way you can print that out and give us a copy of that?
I can probably do that. Or you guys can take a picture of it. So expression, take a picture, it lasts longer. If you haven't already met Dennis,
Put it on your website.
it will be. I spent hours last night getting all of the videos uploaded to my YouTube channel. It was the clunkiest process ever.
I haven't made an account in there because it's one less password I have to remember.
Yeah.
So I just,
I just have mine saved on everything, so I don't actually have to think about it. I use deodorant, but self-cleaning.
I have allergies.
Okay, so you can tell me. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about these reading strategies that we've been focusing on. Let's do it. And let's focus on the purpose behind each of these pieces as well as what we're doing. So before we even start reading, we come across a reading, something that we need to understand. So the first step is doing what? What are we reading first?
The title.
The title. And we're reading the title to identify
The topic.
the topic, okay? So sometimes the title gives us an idea of what the topic is of the piece, but sometimes it can be misleading. So I had a student in my first period class, and he said he went to a movie this weekend, and he thought it was about the war because it had the word war in it, and it wasn't. So he was duped. He was really upset because he thought it was about one thing, and it wasn't. Many times authors do that to engage their readers. It's a trick, it's a manipulation technique, and it is what it is. But you try to understand a little bit more about the topic by looking at the title. What about the author? Why do we care about who the author is?
Because all authors have their own writing style.
Okay, both said the same thing. Style. So oftentimes writers will have their own writing style. So you may be more interested in something because of the author's writing style, or you may be less interested in something because of the writer's style. Any other reasons?
Male and female.
Okay, there's a difference between male and female authors. Not only may you be interested in one more than the other, but sometimes the content is going to be a little bit different. What else? So one of my favorite authors is Emma Donoghue. And Emma Donoghue is an Irish woman, and she writes a lot about the plight of Irish women, specifically women. So I know that she's probably going to write about Irish women, which is appealing to me. But that's her content. That's kind of what she does. That's what she writes about. So you may know a little bit more about the author because of their name, because of their heritage, because of some ties. For those of you who have done the pica traits with the research kids, man killer, yeah, it's Native American name. So she's not necessarily a man killer, but that was her given name. And you can start to identify those things the more you know about certain people's heritage. Good. So when we preview the entire piece, we're looking for certain things. So what are we focusing on when we're previewing the entire piece?
It says up there.
What's that? What it says up there?
Bolded words and italicized words.
Okay, so what's the difference between bolded words and italicized words?
Bolded words are more important.
Okay, bolded words are more important, and they are typically vocabulary words. Good. What about italicized words? I will check and see if I have yours. Yeah. So italicized words do what?
Kind of like a whisper.
Okay, so it's like a whisper. It's like the author saying, hey, you need to know this. But the author's not punching you in the face with the information. They're letting you know it's important, but they're not punching you in the face with the information. Good. So what about subheadings? What's significant about subheadings? Why do we care about subheadings?
They mainly tell you what it's about.
Subheadings tell you about what?
What you're gonna read,
What you reading and yeah, what
what
you.
you're about to read.
What you're reading within that section. What you're reading within that section. So every subheading is going to be specifically about that bit of information. Subheadings are typically bolded. So I was up until 4:30 this morning working on a proposal for the State House. And in that proposal, we use subheadings. So with the subheadings, everybody is going to focus on something different. So I had a subheading statement of purpose. That is the main idea, but the treasurer isn't going to care about the statement of purpose. He's going to care about the section called funding, because that's what he connects to. So subheadings are also a bit of a cheat for us as readers to go directly to an area that we may be more interested in. So let's practice with this. The reason I gave this to you guys is so we could practice with this, because I want you guys to make some stronger connections. So looking at the title, what a difference a few years can make. Does that tell you anything about the passage? No, not really. It doesn't give you a lot of information. What about the author? There's no author listed, so we don't get a lot of information. So as we preview the piece, we can look at the first and last paragraph. I would focus on subheadings. There are no subheadings except for the first one, Mesopotamia, here. The bolded words. So bolded words, Mesopotamia, inhospitable, domesticated, those words are bolded. So in looking at those bolded words, you can start to think about what is this piece about. You can start to draw some connections. Are there any italicized words?
No.
No. Also pay very close attention to the photos. Even though the photos are difficult to read and decipher, photos and images, graphs of any kind, visuals are always very important. The author has said, hey, this is the one thing I'm going to pull out and make a big impact. So I was preparing that presentation for the State House last night, and in doing that, I had to pull some very graphic photos of people dead. So I had to pick the most graphic ones in order to make the biggest impact. That's what authors do. We gather the most impactful pieces. So as we go through this previewing strategy or this before stuff, why do we do that? What are we looking for? The what?
To see if we're interested.
Okay, sometimes it's to see if we're interested. What else could we be looking at? What else could we be looking for? We're looking at things like author. We're looking at words that we know or don't know. What? Okay.
Italicized words.
We're looking for things that we have a prior connection to. So remember we talked last week about having previous connections to people or information. So in doing this, we want to make some connections. So we want to make some connections as early on as possible. So all this previewing stuff is for us to make some connections, to figure out what we know about the piece or what we don't know about the piece. So during involves chunking the information. How do we chunk the information? One paragraph at a time. As we're reading that paragraph, we're taking notes. What kind of notes are we taking? Okay, that's the process of taking notes in the margins, which is what you guys are going to be practicing with and is what will be on your test. On your test on Thursday, there will be a section where you have to annotate. If you give me just a bunch of lines where you underline everything, that's not an annotation. Annotations are pulling out the most significant information that needs to be remembered. You also need to remember on your annotations to differentiate those pieces. So you don't want to underline everything. You don't want to circle everything. You don't want to put a box around everything. You want to be very careful with using highlighters. What's the danger of highlighters? They bleed through. So if you're using many different methods, then you'll be able to distinguish the parts from each other. It's kind of like you're identifying bolded and italicized words for yourself. So as you're taking these notes, I want you to start paying attention to things that are repeated. So why does that matter what's repeated? Okay? It's important, and it's going to help you figure out what. What is repeated over and over again? Part of the main idea is the topic. So the topic is going to be that thing that's repeated over and over again. So to figure out that main idea, you have the topic plus what? Topic plus what?
The author's direction.
There you go. The author's direction. So the direction that the author is going in with that topic. So maybe the author is talking about the size of different dogs. Maybe the author is talking about the goals that people have set. Maybe the author is talking about the obstacles that people have gone through. So the topic is going to be what's repeated over and over again in many different ways. So it may not be the person's name over and over again. It may be a pronoun. So we may replace that name with he or she. It may also be a form of that main idea, that main topic. So we're talking about different types of dogs. You guys are reading. You're not supposed to be reading that. So it may be a version of whatever that topic is. So if we're talking about mastiffs, or we're talking about chihuahuas, if we're talking about shih tzus, if we're talking about Pekingese, we're talking about different types of dogs. So you have to be able to identify those different types of dogs in order to come up with that topic. So in taking notes, if you put a little mark next to everything that is the same or similar, that's going to help you. So off in the margins, when you're taking notes, off in the margins, what are you writing?
Main idea.
A quick summary. That summary is just going to be the main idea, which is the topic plus the author's direction. Do you want, off to the side, do you want to put specific details? No. Why not?
Because they're usually bolded words and there are
Okay. They are usually bolded, italicized, or using some kind of capitalization. So if we were to look and practice with this first paragraph, which is why I didn't want you to read it yet, we're going to look at this and we're going to practice with this together. So Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, derives its name and existence from the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. These two rivers created the Fertile Crescent in the midst of surrounding inhospitable territory. The space we call Mesopotamia is roughly the same as that of modern-day Iraq. So what in that is important enough to underline or circle?
The space we call Mesopotamia is roughly the same as the modern country around there.
Okay, so you feel like the spacing is important. Okay? Anybody else?
I know I ain't
Okay, so before we get back to the Fertile Crescent, modern day Iraq, where did you get that? Okay, so that last sentence, and where is that Iraq connection at?
from where Mesopotamia was.
Okay. You also have the map off to the side. And under that map is a contemporary map of Iraq and the surrounding regions showing Mesopotamia. So I just circled and made a big circle around the map because I like visuals. So for me, it made more sense to circle modern day Iraq and the map itself. It made more sense for me to do that rather than underlining all of that and making a connection over on the map. What else is important? Okay? Between the rivers. Now, why is that important?
Because it's the,
Would have been better to use the actual names of the rivers.
So we can use the name for the rivers, but as we need to know the definition of Mesopotamia, which literally means between rivers. What rivers is it between?
Tigris and Euphrates.
Okay, so here's my cheat. I don't pronounce everything correctly, and I have to remember things. So I think of Mesopotamia, I think of a mess between the tiger and the elephant. That's how I remember it, because Tigris looks very similar to tiger, or Tigris and tiger look very similar. Euphrates and elephant connect in my brain. A mess between a tiger and an elephant, that makes sense. There's a big old mess between the tiger and the elephant. So that's how I remember things. I start to make connections and I start to draw those parallels in my head. If I don't know how to say it, I don't care. It doesn't matter. If you can't say Euphrates correctly, if you can't say it the first time, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to fail anything because you can't say Euphrates. Anything else? What about inhospitable?
What, like the meaning of it?
Do you guys know? How many of you know the meaning of it?
No,
Okay. If you know the meaning of the word, you don't need to accentuate it in any way because it's already bolded and you already know it. You have it somewhere in your brain. You got it. But if you don't know the meaning of the word, you have to use some skills and strategies to figure out the meaning of the word. There are no context clues that help us understand the meaning of inhospitable. So we move on to the next strategy, which we're going to talk more about tomorrow, which is dissecting the word. So what word do you see in inhospitable?
hospital.
Hospital. So when you think of a hospital, what do you think of? A place that helps. Okay? So when you put in,
Place you go when you're sick.
okay?
Which
So a
means-
place that you get help from.
In is the
In
opposite.
means not.
Right.
So if it's not helpful, that doesn't make super sense right in here. Not helpful territory. But if we think of something that's not helpful,
Unfriendly.
unfriendly, dangerous, yeah, those would work. So we have to figure out using context clues. If we don't use the context clues or that we don't know the context clues or don't have them, then we go to the next step, which is dissecting the word itself. If we don't know the word and we don't know how to dissect it, we don't recognize anything in it, or we can't figure out the meaning, that's when we're going to go to the dictionary. So we'll get to that point eventually. So Mesopotamia is the mess between the tiger and the elephant. Anything else? I would write that it's in a dangerous area, dangerous territory, because I don't use the word inhospitable on a regular basis. So my note off to the side is that the mess between the tiger and the elephant is dangerous. That's my summary. So if you start to build your own connections, what you're going to end up doing, you may not necessarily remember that it's the Tigris and the Euphrates, but when you get a question, and the question asks you about the land between what? Two rivers, and you have options, you're going to look at the options that are most closely connected. And then you're going to go back to that first paragraph because you've now mentally and kinesthetically made an attachment with that first paragraph. So you're going to forever have it in your head, or for a very long time, have it in your head where the information is. So let's test that on you guys. So remember the famous failures. Where was Michael Jordan? Top left-hand side.
Yeah, he was taxing.
And who was at the bottom? Einstein. Who was above Einstein? Oprah. Good. So you've made some connections because you saw it and you remembered it. It's the same thing when you have a reading passage. If you ever read something, it's the same when a lot of students I have will read their novels. They'll start reading their novels and they're like, man, I forgot what chapter I'm on. So they'll start to look back and they'll go, oh yeah, here it is. And they'll remember it because they have that kinesthetic attachment to it. They have physically done something, so they have made some kind of connection. So the last part of this, think, write, and discuss. What do you think about? What you
Read.
learn. Remember, it's not just what you read, it's what you learned from that passage. So if you already knew what inhospitable meant, don't think to yourself, I've got to remember what inhospitable means. It's a waste of your time. So think about the things that you learned. When you write a summary, what are you going to include in that summary? In the summary, you're not going to include what you learned as much as,
The words.
yes, exactly what it's about. So the main idea and key details. Be very, very choosy on which key details you use. You don't need a lot of key details because they're already back in the passage, and you have access to that. Who do you discuss with?
What did you say?
Who do you discuss with? Okay, so you want to discuss with people who have read it. Because why? You may get different ideas. You may be able to develop ideas even more. And who?
People who haven't read it.
Non-readers. Good. Why? Okay. You might get them interested in reading it. What else? You may get a different view, or you may be able to elaborate on a view that you had. So essentially, when you're talking to people who haven't read it, it's like you're teaching them, which solidifies your understanding even more. All right, so what I'm going to have you guys do is practice with the rest of this piece. Do not answer the questions on back. Only read and annotate. So again, on Thursday when you take your test, there will be a section where you are required to annotate for points. So take notes in the margins. Highlight things that are significant. Okay?
Be a test over this.
There's going to be a test over this process. Okay? You guys have the rest of the class to do this, and then you will have a short survey before you leave, or a data sheet.